I'm really happy that we're here. Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us in this conversation. Today, we want to explore what we might call the evolution of the Scrum Master role. But maybe it's not an evolution. Maybe it's what the Scrum Master role was, and we really want to dig into it. We want to have this conversation in two parts. We want to be able to introduce some additional guests and bring that in, and then bring in additional feedback from the community. We want to hear from you. So be active in the comments. Let us know what you want to be able to contribute. We want to be able to bring this back and use that, just like the feedback we got when the article that you wrote was published. We got some amazing comments, amazing thoughts from Dr. Sutherland to individuals out there practicing in the field, and we loved it. And that's what drove the want and the desire for this. So that said, I want to introduce my colleague, my friend, Preeti Pugatch. She is head of operations here at Scrum Inc. She is Scrum's master for us, even though we use slightly different terms internally. And absolutely, it's a joy to work with you for the past few years, and I'm glad that you're here.
Thank you, Shaun. I so appreciate you and just the stage you've set here. Yeah, we've been talking about this for a while, right? And
Yeah.
it just makes sense that we're at this point having this conversation too. And before we go into the conversation, I want to introduce you to the community and folks who might not know you, even though I know you're very well known with our clients as well as our trainer community as well. But Shaun, you are our enterprise agile consultant, and you've enabled organizations in highly regulated environments, right? Government, pharma,
Mhm.
aerospace to really accelerate value delivery. And as you and I were preparing for this session, one of the conversations we were having is your role is actually very much similar to what a Scrum Master's role is.
Yeah.
A huge part in optimizing the op model of the organizations that you're working with. So just really excited to go into this conversation with you today.
Awesome. Well, great. Well, let's jump into it. I
Yep.
want to start off with a softball question, but I think it's a good one. What inspired you to write this article to begin with? What was that impetus?
Yeah. So in my previous role, towards the end, I was a team lead
Hmm.
for our IT business analysts and project managers. And you and I worked at the same
Yeah.
organization, so you know this. Um, and as part of that job, it was very uniquely positioned within the organization, right, between our stakeholders and between the team that was helping deliver the value for the organization. And I was one of those people optimizing the op model, right? Making sure the intersection of people, process, technology, governance was working
Hmm.
to accelerate the value delivery. Um, and the role had a true systems view. We were able to see across the organization to see what everyone was doing to ensure that was input into what we were doing. But also, I was working with the team and making sure that they were effective, they were efficient in that delivery. And so, we were constantly looking to see how can we do this better? How can we work better? And so the Scrum Master role, actually, when I was, applying for that, I saw it as a very similarly positioned role.
Yep.
Somebody who is central in the organization is so uniquely positioned between the team and the org to help the team be effective in service of the organization, right? And how do you then enable the organization to be effective as well and be high performing? So to your question of what prompted me to write the article, something I noticed, which was frankly disappointing for me, was that this role that's supposed to be a leadership role was often sidelined.
Hmm.
It was a don't bring your opinions, ask the team what they need to do. Um, you don't need to worry, like the Scrum Master role doesn't need to worry about financials. I was hearing a lot of this across the industry, focus on the team. And that I saw how that drove the wrong behaviors, how that drove working in a void. It was the team being effective for the purpose of team being effective. Like it didn't make sense. Um, and the Scrum Masters not necessarily being connected to the organization, to the strategy, what the team was actually supposed to do led to all of these behaviors. And it was sort of a self-fulfilling prophecy. Part of it
Hmm.
was organizations weren't enabling it, but part of it was Scrum Masters also weren't doing it. And so the focus was on how do I run this meeting better? How do I facilitate this meeting better? Not this is what the org needs to do. How are we delivering that? How can we do that better? And you and I have had this conversation
Yeah.
so much that
We're
recently,
both really passionate about actually getting stuff done and
yeah,
doing it effectively and optimizing the system. And it's, what we say, be hard on process, but not on people. It's a big part of it. And I think people stop focusing on the process improvement side and they focus on the, what I'll call pejoratively, that kumbaya type of scrum mastery. Oh, how do we make everybody
right.
feel better? Are we happy? Well, happiness is the outcome of an effective team. It's not the way into making it. But I'll continue your thought.
No, I know.
Jumped in there.
So to just kind of state the point is what really made it clear for me that this, we needed to write this article, was I was seeing sort of this increasing negative perception, but also dialogue in the industry. I was seeing an increasing number of articles on LinkedIn,
Yeah.
conversations going, Scrum Master role is useless. The Scrum Master role doesn't make sense. What is this person doing? Scrum Masters are being laid off because people aren't understanding the value. And it just made sense that we need to set this tone, right? Um,
Yeah. We need to reframe it.
we need to reframe it and really be able to show what the role can do. So that kind of led to sort of officially documenting all of those thoughts.
I'm really glad that you did, and I love the way that you did it. Because even though we talked about it, when I sat down and read it, I went, "Oh yeah, that's actually a better way to say it than when I start riffing and just going off on my soapbox moments when I'm talking about stuff." I was like, "Oh, this
We're
is a much more
passionate about
intelligent way to
it.
do it." So
Yeah.
yeah, I appreciate the way you did it and that you invited us to have this conversation because when I think about it, we talked about this not too long ago. My first experience with taking a Scrum class was actually with JJ and our colleague McCall Baggett, who was wonderful, and they introduced me to Scrum years and years ago.
Yeah.
And during the class, I remember being overwhelmed. I was drinking out of a fire hose of information. I was trying to apply it. How does this work in my context? Because I was a product manager for an organization, trying to figure out how am I going to bring this Scrum Master stuff back as a product manager, not realizing that I probably should have also taken a product owner course, but that's a different story. And then I remember probably second day, halfway through, JJ was saying something, and I thought to myself, well, it sounds to me like the Scrum Master's job is to work themselves out of a job. And I've seen other people have that. You mentioned something similar. And I was struck by it, and I asked him about it, and he said, "Yeah, that's the goal, is to get so good at optimizing the system that you don't have to be a part of that system anymore." But then when I started to take Scrum back out to my team at that time, and then all of the subsequent teams that I've worked with over the past few years, I realized that that doesn't make a lot of sense, because if you're doing exactly what you said in your article and just now, the goal is to be able to help not even really evolve, but just fully utilize the individual who's in that Scrum Master position. And it's not just about, okay, can we do, I saw somebody the other day on Reddit talking about how they had a bad Scrum Master who just sent meeting invites. It's not about sending meeting invites. It's not about updating tickets on whatever platform you're using. It's not about administrata. It's about being able to help everybody understand their own work and then choose to be able to do it as effectively as possible.
Yeah.
So I know when I get focused, I'm going to hyper focus on the stuff that I'm most interested in. The Scrum Master's job is to help say, hey, don't locally optimize. Let's think about how your work, our work, impacts not just your team system, but the organization system. And that's where we talk about changing operating models. How do we find a way to help zoom back out, see the big picture, and then work towards how can it be an advantage for all of us?
Yeah, absolutely. And one of the things, that came out of a conversation recently was actually how disconnected teams are from the purpose of the organization,
Uh-huh.
from the strategy, right? Like we talk about Simon Sinek's golden circle, right? The
Yeah.
the why, how, what. Teams don't understand that. And when they don't understand that, they work within this vacuum, this void, and naturally the decisions that then you make are for local optimization, not thinking about the future, right? And I mean, I saw that in my previous organization too, as I mentioned, like in the um, IT, PMBA role. If we weren't thinking about scaling, if we weren't thinking about how are we positioning our organization for the future, we would do things like customize solutions to the nth degree, which means that you can't then take the same feature, make it available for other customers, which doesn't mean you see something you're working on, you can't productize it, you can't innovate because
Yeah.
you're so at the detail level of the implementation. Now, what's also interesting though is at the same time, what I've seen is people hesitate to sort of understand and work at the detail level. And that also doesn't enable the teams to become better. And one of the things that, Shaun, you have a really good spiel about it. So actually, I'm going to set you up to say that after, right? What all of this is about. It's about planning, replanning, right? Inspecting, adapting. So I'm
Yeah.
going to let you say that. But one of the things that I've noticed in retros, and Dr. Jeff shares this story, right? Go in with what you are observing. Go in
Yes. Data.
with where the team needs to improve. Don't just go in and say, what would you like to talk about? Right. And there's a balance. Like sometimes you do want to pull from the team because sometimes and that's because you're seeing that that's what the team needs, but you're observing. You are
Yeah.
seeing how this team is operating and how the organization's responding. You're seeing what the organization needs and how we need to evolve. Bring those ideas in. You're so uniquely positioned because you can see across the board.
Because you
Um,
should be looking across the board and connecting between other teams and other parts of the organization. It's not just, is my team doing a good job? It's, is our team supporting the overall structure of how we do things organizationally? So yeah, and I want to emphasize for it's not necessarily coming in with one targeted thing, but if you've observed something, if you've got data to be able to prove it, which is where my bread and butter lives, if
Yep.
we have evidence as part of that empirical process, present the evidence, maybe nudge in a certain direction, but ultimately the team's going to choose the thing that they think is going to improve them the most.
Yep.
I think I've seen some Scrum Masters, Scrum team coaches of some kind come in and go, "Oh, you need to fix this." That person might be right, but also they might be assuming something without diving into that root cause.
Yep.
Really, it's about how do we take some observation, some understanding, and really understand it. We're not seeing enough root cause analysis. We're not seeing enough data being the focal point of the conversation or of those suggestions. Because a coach can come in and say, do this because the Scrum Guide said so, or because the Scrum at Scale Guide said so. That's
Yep.
not why those things exist. Those things exist to be able to help remind people that there's a basic structure that you can add to and that you can ensure helps you support your organization.
And that goes back to my point of don't be afraid to get down into the details,
You
right?
have to.
Don't be afraid to roll up your sleeves and ask questions. Part of the Scrum Master's job is, enabling that focus, but also helping hold a team accountable for what it is they need to do, right? And
Mhm.
that means you're looking at the data. That means you're looking at the metrics that are showing how the organization's progressing. That means you're making those metrics visible to the team and saying, this is how we're doing and how do we improve. And often what I find is, you know, folks get sort of sucked into the velocity piece,
Ugh, yeah.
right? And it's, well, velocity for what purpose?
It either is helping your team understand their work, which is where I've seen it be incredibly helpful, where a team can see it and you can say, "Oh, look, your velocity went down," or they don't even point it out. They'll see it if you make it evident, and
Yep.
they're going to go, "Oh, well, there's a reason for that." Well, what was the reason? And normally that's going to loop back to either some underlying cause, or they're going to say, "Well, we didn't have enough backlog refinement that sprint, and that's why we got slow because we were trying to tackle big stuff." Oh, what would help us improve in the future? Well, we need more backlog refinement. That's almost always the solution to that problem. If you see velocity dip, why? It's because the backlog wasn't clear. So let's go back to the basics. Let's keep solving for those things. But what I think is really, really valuable about what you've been saying is that element of business acumen. You've probably heard me say it a million times. I like a business-minded Scrum Master. I don't want someone who's coming in just to facilitate. I don't want someone who's doing those things. Just like you mentioned, when I go in as a consultant to work with a customer, I sort of take on the role of a business-minded Scrum Master with them. I'm not there to set up their instance of the tool tracking system. I might help guide them if they choose to do that, but I'm there to observe, to be really direct, ask challenging questions, show them the things that maybe they're missing. And yes, will I use facilitation techniques that I'll use to train a class? Absolutely. Will I use the same techniques that I might use with a team if I'm acting as a Scrum Master? Sure, I will. But when I go in as a product owner for an engagement, acting as a Scrum Master consultant, what I'm trying to do is help them to help themselves, which means I have to be able to understand their business, their domain, even if it's not my native domain, which has been the case for most of my career. How do I help get them to be able to choose where they want to focus next? It's not about me, it's about their outcomes and making things happen.
Well, and something you just said, right? It's understanding the domain is critical.
Yeah.
When you don't understand the domain in which folks are working, you can't help them be more effective because you don't fundamentally understand how they're working, right?
Mhm.
A team working in a software development shop, their work progress, their workflow looks much, much different than a team working in a pharma shop,
Yeah,
right?
absolutely.
When you bring in regulations, when you bring in all of these things, if you don't fundamentally understand what that looks like, you can't adapt. And that's part of it. What, some of the struggles that I see folks have is they take the Scrum guide and they say they don't treat it as a guide, but they treat it as law.
Yeah, which is not the way it's intended.
You can't take and implement the same thing in every single context. It is imperative that it is adapted to the context. And the Scrum Master skills, right? We talk about the Shuhari, they might actually
Mhm.
start there and go, let's try this. Great. Absolutely, because you're trying something new. You have something that's guiding you in how to do it. But very quickly, you need to pivot to go, what is going to work in our context? Because that's the goal isn't agile implementation. The goal isn't the implementation of
No.
Scrum. The goal is helping the organization deliver on its outcomes faster, better, right? Like, I think we forget that that is the ultimate goal,
Yeah.
which is where then we focus on team effectiveness, not in service of org effectiveness, but for the sake of it. And actually, what that drives then is a focus on individual effectiveness, something you were
Yeah.
saying earlier, right? And we've seen that. We've seen where organizations come to us and say, well, I'm worried about sustainable pace. And when we really look into it, what's happening is the concern is sustainable pace of an individual versus a
Mhm.
sustainable system. And when you don't have that North Star, that's the kind of behavior that's driven.
Yeah, because the Scrum team should be an engine for delivery. How do we keep it well oiled, well maintained? Do we have enough inspection points and adaptation points to be able to look at it critically and go, oh, we see that we're not, and I'm not good at mechanical stuff, so I'm not going to try and mix too many metaphors, but we're not greasing the right part. I don't know. How do we get those things to be part of it? And in our world, it's because we're not necessarily, sometimes I have worked with teams doing mechanical stuff, but we're
Yeah.
really thinking about the system of the team. How do we figure out what that is? Which means we have to understand their domain. We have to be, what I'd say is, insatiably curious. You must be ready and willing to learn. I mean, you can always see that there's a giant bookshelf that I'm stacking to, not to say that I don't have a whole heck of a lot of stuff on my Audible too,
Yeah.
but how do I get all these things in that I can constantly learn? Because I'm not a domain expert in every domain that I've jumped into, but I'm so deeply curious about understanding how I can help, how the teams interact with each other, both interpersonally and intrapersonally, as they talk about their departmental shifts or their divisional shifts or their branches. I want to dig into it and really understand what it is that's going to help them to deliver, as you just said, their most effective outcomes. And Shuha I think, is an important thing to go back to, both because I'm passionate about it as a former martial artist, which I know Dr. Sutherland trained in martial arts, which is a big part of it, as well as it being a lean concept. But so much of it is you've got to start somewhere
Mhm.
and have some fundamental understanding. That's where you reference the guide. I remember when I first became a true Scrum Master for a team, stepping out of my product management role and into a Scrum Master role. My team kept looking to me and saying, Shaun, what's Scrum say about this? How does Scrum do this? How does Scrum do this? And I kept thinking, well, I don't think it's about what Scrum says. It's
Yeah.
about what makes sense for us. Like we have to do what makes sense. We have to be deeply pragmatic about our approach. And but they kept saying, well, what does Scrum say? How do we do it in Scrum? How do we do it in Scrum? Most of the questions I see are, how does Scrum say to do this? How do you do it now? What makes sense to you? Let's do that and then see where it fits in. And instead of adding Scrum meetings, which is not the intent of the events, right? It's not, we don't have a daily Scrum on top of the daily huddle that we already have. We don't
Right.
add a sprint review on top of our steering committee review. We don't add them on top of, they're in place of. We want to change and reframe what you use that time for so that you can do what makes the most sense and stay hyper focused on what you need to do outcome wise.
100%. So Shaun, I was thinking, maybe we talk a little bit about how Scrum Masters can be more effective, even just
Yes.
looking at our events, right? Let's just use that because that is where often a lot of people are starting as they're entering this, right, in that shoe phase. But before we do that, some of the things that we talk about are, again, business outcomes
Mm-hmm.
always need to be front and center. And in large global, right, organizations with, thousands and thousands of people, understanding the organization's purpose is still important. And
Uh-huh.
then what that looks like by the time we get to your team, right, there's different strategies along the way that are helping to meet that. So understand that strategy. That's going to be key to helping the team. And we also talk about, just the design principles of an agile organization, right? Like having that in mind, I think helps to then put the Scrum Guide a little bit more in context, right? So we talk about
Yeah.
we're driving holistic alignment, right? Through transparency, we are ensuring we're expediting resolution of these impediments, systemic impediments. We are promoting effective collaboration. We're ensuring that the organization's dynamic and all of those things, empowering, the people with the best view of the problem to make the decisions. Those are the things that the Scrum Guide then says, here's how you can actually go and implement, try it, and then again, adapt it to your context, right?
Yeah.
So I want to set the stage that way. Now, let's talk about those events, right? So planning, actually, even before that, we can talk about backlog refinement. Um, how can a
Backlog
Scrum
refinement
be
is
more
so
effective?
deeply important, and I think
Yes.
people don't do it enough. But what was your question? Sorry.
No,
I
so
think
let's start there, right? Because you're also seeing this in the field. How can a Scrum Master be a lot more effective? How can they truly be a partner for the product owner and the team?
I think what you said is the right thing. It's how do they be a partner? Sometimes I'll describe it as an adversarial partnership, but it's still a partnership. I mean, it can be.
Are you
Ideally, you
pulling on
find a
like
good
how
place.
Tess and I are?
Well, yeah, that, and I see it all the time because you need to be able to challenge
Mhm.
when something's happening. Because I often, as a former project manager, product owner now, the way that I think is, what do I have to do? How can I maximize my customer's experience? How can I deliver more? How can I do this? But that means that I ask a whole heck of a lot of my team when I put my product owner hat on. And that's sometimes too much. And that's where we break that sustainable pace of our system. I need, when I'm a product owner, my Scrum Master, just like when I'm a Scrum Master working with a product owner, I need to be able to have the comfort and relationship with them to say, respectfully, those are great ideas, but can we find a better way to structure when they come in? Can the team plan that work as opposed to you shoveling more coal onto their already burning fire? We don't want that because we don't want to push people away. We don't want to burn the candle at both ends. We want to be able to set the stage for it. So as a Scrum Master, I'm going to coach my product owner as much as I'm going to coach my team to say, how can we help make it really clear for the team? Like you said before, what's the strategy? What's the overarching goal? What are the outcomes? What are the long-term things that we want to see in our system or for our customers or for our customers' customers as we go down this road? How can we build a better widget, as it were, as a team? And that's what I'm going to help coach them out. Just like I'm going to try and coach the organization. Hey, organization, you keep going around the product owner and trying to shovel things onto my team. Please stop doing that. Please help use our system to get things in the right way. And once people start to think about it as how do you feed a system? How do you have some funnel built really intelligently to allow the right things to come in so that the team can stay really, really focused? Then you can start to see things happening. And backlog refinement is really the key to unlocking velocity. If you're talking back to what you said a minute ago, how do we get velocity? You need to make sure that it's really clear what you're working on and why. And then just do it. Just stay focused and do it.
And something you said there, right? Doing the right thing, reminding is this the right thing to do? Like you said, and because the product owner is also in this position, right? There's so many things coming at them of, can we do this? Can we do this? Can we do this? And having a partner who can also say, is this the right thing for us to do? Because again, you understand the
Yeah.
organization, you understand the system, you understand what, we need to deliver. A lot of organizations have quarterly goals, right? Know those so that you can be the true partner and go, does this make sense right now? And doing the right thing and balancing it with doing the thing right.
Yeah. Right thing, right time, right quality.
It is equally important. And so if you are an equal partner, then you can also have the conversation of, right, okay, so we need to do this. How do we make sure we can do this in a way that we need to do it too, right? And that naturally opens up to conversations about upskilling, about innovation, about bringing the team in to kind of brainstorm different ideas of how we might do it. If we're so focused on doing, kind of looking at things as a task versus what is the
Yep.
outcome we need to drive, that sort of leads to those wrong behaviors. So I love that. Okay, planning.
Really the same thing. So if we think about it, the team and the product owner really need to own backlog refinement and planning. Because the product owner's gone through all this hard work of ideally truly prioritizing the backlog, truly expressing what the value is of these items, and then not trying to assign or pre-assign tasks. Oh, I think that John's going to be great at this. I think that Susan's going to be best at that. I think that Belly is going to be that. What are we trying to do to get these things out there? We don't want to do that. We want to think, what is the overall outcome? How do we express it? And then inviting the right people in. Maybe you do want to bring your subject matter expert in before you're doing a team level backlog refinement. Hey, I've got questions for you about the system architecture. I've worked with a bunch of people who are in that role, and they're very, very meticulous about how they want things to be. Great. Well, I don't want you to have to answer all the questions on the fly. Let me bring you in on a Monday. Let me set the stage for you that on Wednesday this week we're going to talk about it. So be aligned, be ready to go. Same thing happens when sprint planning, which should be that counterweight to backlog refinement. How do we bring the right people in to know what we're going to talk about, have some of those questions answered, or at least on our mind? So when the team sees what might start off as a vague user story or a vague product backlog item, they can go, well, what does that actually mean? What do you want to see? How do you want to see it? And then the team becomes accountable for asking enough questions and they're asking what they need to know to both define their acceptance criteria, if they're using that tool, to make sure that whatever they're going to do is going to meet their system's definition of done. How do we get those things to be a part of it? And then as a Scrum Master, I'm going to be a part of that, not because I'm going to try and guide people in one direction or the other, not because I'm leaning towards the product owner going, do what the product owner says, or leaning towards a team and say, product owner, you're asking too much. I'm going to go, is everybody's voice being heard? Is everything understood? Like if I look around the room, ideally it's in a room, but maybe it's on a Zoom call, is everybody on camera, hopefully, so I can see their facial expressions? Because if they're off camera, they're probably doing this,
That's right.
scrolling their phone. I don't want to see that. I want to be able to know, well, how's my team interacting? Did somebody say something and did it land flat? Are they suddenly dejected? If so, I want to call attention to it. Hey, what went wrong there? How can we have a better conversation? Because we can't build a better process if we don't know how we're interacting with our current process or each other.
100%, right? And that's where the domain knowledge
It's
becomes
incredibly helpful.
critical.
Yeah.
You can't improve a process if you don't understand it. And because often in planning, in daily, in reviews, in retros, there are gems being dropped of, oh, I wish this was better. Oh, I wish I could have done this. And often teams don't, and we'll go into the daily next, often teams don't necessarily raise it as I have an impediment. What they will say is, oh, I wish this was going, oh my gosh, this is so annoying. Oh, this is such a time suck. And if we're not understanding the thing that they're talking about in the broader context of the work, and how actually, again, it impacts what the team's looking to deliver in that sprint, right? We're going to miss it
Yeah.
because we don't fundamentally understand how this little thing impacts the rest of their work. I saw that, right, in one of the organizations we were working with, is that's what the teams were doing. They had sort of a process of kind of understanding sort of the bigger picture, and they were little things that the teams would say in their dailies. "Oh, this just took so much time." And then, but sometimes what would happen is the team would go, "We just need a better tool for this. If we
Yeah.
had a different tool, that would just work." And the Scrum Master in that role, right? We talk about root cause analysis. Don't just take that. Don't just say, "Oh,
But
you
dig
need a
into
new
it.
tool. Let me go find a new tool." Is that really the right resolution? What is really going on here? Because sometimes when we're like so heads down and trying to do our work, we think that's what we need.
Yeah.
And like as a business analyst in my previous, a lot of times I'd get the question, "I just need a report. If I could just have this report, then I could just do this work," versus, and what that would open up for me is, well, why do you need the report?
Mhm.
What is the issue that you're actually seeing? Let me go fix that issue. So you actually don't even need to worry about this and spend so much more time doing this.
Even for
Miss
me, when I'm sitting in a Scrum Master role, someone tells me, "Hey, what's the team working on? Can you get me a report for this?" My immediate thought is, "Oh, our system is broken because that should be available on demand. How can I automate that away? How can I make sure that everybody knows how to get that information? I don't, if I have to stop and get it for you, you've just made me an admin versus me enabling the system to change." I I joke sometimes that the Scrum Master is there to absorb the chaos of the team because we want the team to be able to focus. We want to reduce context switching. We want to be able to help increase alignment. We want to be able to reduce all those extra meetings. But there's still all this chaotic business environment. There's still these customers that need what they
Yeah.
need, team members that need what they need. Who solves for that? Ideally, in my mind, the Scrum Master is going to be the person that says, "Let me take that on. I can shuffle through those challenges. I'll suffer through more context switching to be able to help provide you the time to do what you do best. So you can go heads down and stay focused. I can look at the picture as a whole, help collect all the pieces of information, and then make sure that everybody else has it so that they can stop interrupting us because we want to reduce interruptions and use that buffer that ideally we've got in our backlog to either shrink so we don't have to use as much buffer and we can plan more and delight our customers more, or that we can use it for the stuff that's really truly urgent and important versus it's the thing that somebody had an idea for today because we don't
Well,
want just every idea to make it to the backlog.
100%, right? And that's where we sort of talk about the role in governance.
Yeah.
Organizations will need reports. There's something happening, somebody somewhere needs some information. And if we can funnel that in a way where we can provide that information, but then also look to go, right, if this is a need, how do we make this available in a different way so that the team, we're protecting the team's focus, but also bringing the team in when we need information. What the flip side of what I see is protecting too much focus
Yes.
and actually disempowering the team to have a voice in what they want to do. Sometimes there's things happening in the organizations where leadership is looking to bring in different folks in whatever conversation, right? And if the product owner and the Scrum Master go, "Nope, they're at capacity, absolutely not, we're not going to do this," actually we're robbing the folks of the chance to then also have a bigger presence. Maybe they're interested in doing it and maybe they'll go, "You know what? I will work extra today because actually this is something I really want to do."
Yeah. Yeah, because sustainable pace doesn't have to mean 40 hours in a week or 8 hours in a day. It's what do I do to keep my energy level high? How do I do that? Which means sometimes you've got to invest more things. With the advent of AI, I remember not too long ago, I had this idea. I want to see it built. I want to do this. I was like, but I can't leverage the design team here at Scrum Inc. to do it because they're working on something really important. It's like, let me take some of my personal time and dig in. I started writing Python script, which means AI wrote most of my Python script and I used it, but it was really, really helpful. And I learned a lot. I invested a lot in me through figuring out that process. And I went, this is great. And I was able to build a new tool that hopefully we'll be able to use in the near future. But it's those kinds of things where I effectively took my vacation and played around to learn. I love that stuff. And that's what I want to see from other Scrum Masters too. It's not, oh, I maximize my team's current output, so now I can relax and play Hearthstone. It's how can we get out there and really do more? What can I build into the system? How can I understand the system? How can I help other people understand the system so that we can continue to feed it the right stuff?
And that's the people part of the op model.
Yeah,
Understanding what people are passionate about, understanding what might actually help somebody see things from a different perspective and enable like the overall organization to be better. That's if we don't understand our folks and what they're, how they want to grow, what they want to do, we can't enable those things. And that's where, we try to protect the team, but then it's sort of it actually helps
it can hold them back sometimes.
it holds them back, right? It doesn't help them like
Just like
challenge.
product owners assigning things to people because they're the best at it. Well, how can people learn if the one best person, best is
Right.
the one person who continues to do that one thing? All of a sudden, you've created this little silo around them, and other people don't have that skill. We want to create very intentionally those cross-functional teams.
Yep.
So, I mean, to go back to the evolution of the Scrum Master role, it's really not the evolution, it's the original intent being applied, but we need to reframe it and refocus it because I think people have misunderstood how to really dig in, become domain experts, to become people that look at the system and not just their team. Because if you just focus on your team, or you get assigned a second or a third team, and hopefully no more than that, but if you've got a couple of teams, you're split focus, you're not really figuring out how can we look at creating a better system. And it's that operations model way of thinking because you've got that strategic layer at the top, the tactical level where people are doing things, and then operations in the middle. And it's not about eliminating managers or turning managers into leaders solely. It's how can we evolve the system to support taking strategy, making it crystal clear of how we do it, operationalizing it as much as we can without overburdening ourselves, and then allowing us to be really swift and tactical or agile, as the term may be.
Actually, every person in the organization should, in my opinion, understand 5 questions. And let's see if I can tell you what those questions are, because I've been thinking about this before I lose my train of thought. Why does the organization exist? What is the purpose, right? Um, what is it that we're doing to deliver that? How are we doing it? Are we doing it effectively?
Mm-hmm.
And then how are we making sure that everybody in the organization is constantly evolving, adapting? How do we build resiliency into the organization so we continue to stay relevant? Everyone in the organization should understand that, right? And especially Scrum Masters need to understand that. If we can't understand those things, if we can't understand the metrics that will, the sort of lag and lead metrics that will show us whether or not we are going to position ourselves for long-term success,
Yep.
we can't help the teams be high performing. We can't help the teams. And again, the teams will focus in on what they're doing. They will become disengaged. They won't tie themselves to a bigger purpose. That
I love
bigger
this. Yeah.
purpose is what drives that engagement. I am here because this is our, right? One of the things that folks love about Scrum Inc. is our mission,
Mm-hmm.
changing the way the world works so there are happier and more empowered people. There are higher performing organizations. That's what drives people to be here. If we don't, and that's what drives the engagement. If people don't fundamentally understand the mission of the organization and then what we're doing to drive that, we can't unlock the true potential of the people in the organization.
I love that. I think I want to pause there too to unlock the true potential of people in organization. I think for our next conversation, let's invite the people in. Let's have that be the kickoff to how do we do that? How do we make it work? But honestly, this was a lot of fun. I wish we could keep going. Thank you so much. Thank you everyone who's joined us. And feel free to reach out. Let us know if you have any questions, comments. We're really looking forward to being able to incorporate your thoughts into this next conversation too. So join us for that. We're excited to be here.
Yeah, thank you for this conversation. I'm super excited to continue this.
Awesome. Thank you, Preeti.
Thanks, Shaun.
Cheers.